George, at mission control.
Yes, exactly. Always nerve-wracking.
But sit with Pop.
Okay, I think we are. Okay, I think we're live. Okay, I think we're live.
Yep, live on YouTube.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait for Richard to join us before we start recording. But we could start. Richard, we could start talking now before Richard joins us.
We're never short of words.
We're never short of words. How are you, Peter?
Yeah, I was just reading the Blockbuster report that the Pompeo wanted to either assassinate or
Yes. Well, I was wondering about that. I mean, but I'm always wary of the things that former CIA people or current CIA people tell us. So you always wonder, why are they telling us this? Why are they telling us this now? What's the agenda? And we don't know. I mean, who comes out badly from all of this? Well, obviously Pompeo, obviously Trump. Julian Assange also does not come out particularly well. Remember, I mean, it suggests that he was in cahoots with the Russians at various points, and that the Russians were trying to get him out of the UK. Who comes out well? Obama, the Obama DOJ. Okay, so I think Richard Barris is going to join us. He's
connecting his audio. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So I'm just always a little suspicious.
Yeah, but the way it was rolled out, like 30 people.
Yeah, that's right. But what if it was 30 people who say that Putin was absolutely determined to prevent Biden from winning the 2020 election? You would say, yeah, right. So, these are people that would, Richard. I think you're on mute. I don't hear you. Oh, he's connecting to audio.
There we go. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
How are you, Richard?
All right. Good. How you guys doing?
Great. That is so impressive. That background that you have. I mean, all of it. Something like that.
You know what? If you get with Laura, she can tell you what we do. It's actually pretty simple. It is. I got this fold out green screen that I got from Amazon. I can send you the link. It wasn't even that much. We used to have this big one. It was elaborate and it was annoying and it constantly got wrinkled. This one is like, it comes like a piece of luggage and you open it up and it rolls up and then it comes out and extends and you just push it back down and roll it back in. It's really easy. And it's just real. And then with Zoom handles the rest. You just tell them what image you want. It's really cool.
It's really very, very impressive. I mean,
you could travel with it. You could travel with it, like bring it on an airplane or something.
Have you ever been in a real green room?
Yeah.
Studio?
Yeah. And I was shooting for that. Like the ones I've been in, one of them I really liked. They had the whole wall green. It was like on the wall, around the corners. And I was shooting for that, but it was just like too elaborate for us. And I'm like,
you'll You have to have a special technician to do it if you really want. I mean, it just not someone off the street. I mean, you actually have to be trained to do it. Because I've worked in green studios, and it's really, really cool when you see the after effect. Okay, because what they can do, I mean, they can create reality. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It looked like wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
All right.
I mean, that's really
a real green room. It's paint. It's a special
paint. Yeah. That's right. It was definitely paint. It was. It looked like it was so flat though, like matte. You know, like matte, MATTE. You know, and it was just when I saw it, I was like, that's what I want to do. But it was an epic failure. Maybe later, maybe another time.
All right. So we'll start and welcome all to the gaggle. Welcome to guests on YouTube who have already joined us. Very happy to see you here. We're going to have a fun time because once again, we are very fortunate to have with us the great, outstanding American pollster, Richard Barris. It's now a regular feature of the gaggle, and we're very excited to do this. And of course, Richard, there's an awful lot to discuss. So there was the Trump rally in Georgia over the weekend. We had the Rasmussen poll from last week, which had Trump defeating Biden 51-41, and Harris by an even more substantial margin. We have this upcoming week, which is supposed to be the make or break week, as the media put it, make or break for the Biden administration. He's got this, the bipartisan infrastructure bill plus the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. And we have obviously Trump has made clear, and Bob Woodward made clear also last week, that Trump will run in 2024, that, you know, barring, you know, a life-threatening disease, he will run. And then we also had last week the audit from Arizona. So I just wonder whether we could perhaps start with maybe the smaller subject first, because that hasn't really been covered very much in the media, which is the Arizona audit. First of all, what is your take on it? Are there likely to be any serious consequences arising from it? Or, you know, will this really just simply disappear? Or is this just going to be animating the Trump movement going forward?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to do that. I've been looking forward to this, guys. I had a great time last time, and I was looking forward to doing this again. So I'm glad we're doing it. Yeah, with the audit, when we did my show on Friday, it just come out. I didn't have time to read it. We all got the little drips like everybody else did, and it was very clear the media wanted to get in front of it. There's a few things I want to say about it. One, I guess, is first and foremost, the media did not report everything the audit said. It was deeply, deeply dishonest reporting. That showed significant problems, and those are the issues that I've been talking about for a long time. Now, I think Republicans took the bait here a little bit. They didn't do what people like myself and others who investigated multiple states, they did not do what we said to do. This was simply, think about a CPA going back over your tax return from the prior year, and maybe you have to file an amendment or something because you may have made a mistake, but they didn't really go back over every single receipt and double check whether or not you really did pay that expense. All right. So if I could give an analogy, we took a very different approach, which was we got the absentee ballot information from the states, and we picked up the phone and we called people and we said, John Doe at 123 Main Street, did you request a ballot on? Did you submit a ballot on? And that is what needed to be done in order for people to understand whether officials did or did not count mismatched signatures or ballots, period, forgetting about chain of custody. Chain of custody is a great way to identify which people you should probably contact, but it's not going to tell you a whole lot about whether that vote was legitimate or not. And I think this is this was by design. And I think Republicans took the bait a little bit, and now they paid $1 million plus for, to put out a report that the media could use against them because it really wasn't what needed to be done. Look, Matt Braynard, he took a very similar approach. They have now removed his video from the testimony in Arizona, which was a video from a legislative hearing to determine what he found when he investigated in a lot of the same approach that we took. And this was a mistake. It was a strategic mistake to go about it like this. And I understand people are saying, well, we found 30,000 ballots with change of address flags who voted outside, their precinct, their county, or wherever it is they're supposed to be. And that's fine and everything. But the way to do this was more like a canvas where you go record by record and you call or contact these people in any way possible. And you ask them to validate whether or not they did do what the record shows. And that is simply not what happened here.
Well, Richard,
people need to understand that.
Number one, the elections in the United States seem more and more opaque as we go along. Okay, number one. Yeah. Okay, it's not so clear cut. And number two, does it really matter? Does it move the needle for the rival tribes? Okay, because you know what it is. It's a Fox News story. Okay, and that's it. I mean, that it's more of a strategy of omission. It's not even worth covering.
That's right.
Fox News story.
That's right.
Whatever. And of course, people that have issues with the election are going to say, "Well, look at the audit. Look at the audit." See, my point is, does it really change anything? Does it harden any positions, or is it just reveal where we sit now, with a lay of the land right now?
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting. We just polled Georgia, and I know we're going to talk about that too. But the fact of the matter is, no matter what the media does, omitting, trying to, twist or change what the findings of a report are, we've been asking people in that state and others for months what their view is. And for those who were locked in, that something happened, that there were shenanigans, they're not going to change their mind because of the way the media reported this audit. In fact, in Georgia, we simply asked, we give them no choice to choose undecided. Do you or do you not believe that election officials counted ballots that were either illegal or, with mismatched signatures? And it actually rose since January by 5 points. So all of this attempt to try to bury, I think you probably are right on that. I really do. The bottom line is we're in our corners, and I don't think anything the media says will change anybody's mind. I just don't.
But I mean, with the corner that has apprehensions about the openness of having a clean election. I mean, I guess what George and and we've talked about this a lot. I mean, are the Republicans in a position to do anything about it? Looking at 2020, okay. I mean, we can't undo this, okay. No matter what happens.
No, it's never going to be undone, Peter. Okay. You're 100% right.
But with the precautions, what to look out for, and if they do identify those issues, can they do anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, this is what the Republicans. It can be frustrating when you're a pollster like me and you look at the numbers and you wonder why the Republicans run so scared on this stuff. They have control of almost every single one of these legislatures in question, and but take Georgia, for instance. There are certainly some wins for election reform in that bill. But the fact of the matter is, we just polled 10 different questions about election reform. And it's very clear, including big chunks of Democrats and independents who did not vote for Donald Trump. They wanted a much more strict reform bill, and they didn't get it. Republicans simply did not listen to their own voters. They could do it, but I just don't understand why they don't have the courage to do it. That Republicans really suffer from a lack of courage. For instance, nearly 6 in 10 in the state of Georgia, about 6 in 10, 59%, said that they want a full audit and canvass of the state. And that has not happened. Brian Kemp just keeps assuring everybody it's been taken care of, and that new bill is going to secure elections. But if you poll and ask the people of Georgia, a very large majority says they want bans on drop boxes. They didn't like that practice. And everybody when we talk about these issues, we frame them in the context of expanding voter access. And Democrats go out and they buy domains like Jim Crow 2.0. And meanwhile, voters aren't very partisan on this, which is incredible. When it comes to election reform proposals, they're not very it's across the board support for this stuff, and they buckle. So, I mean, they can do something about it, Peter. They just haven't.
Well, I mean,
even deeply red states.
Are you telling me that now it's just a given? There's going to be drop boxes? I mean, forever now?
Yes. I mean, this is the way the left works, and people, I don't know, that are more moderate Republicans, maybe that hold elected office, they never really understood this. It was always going to be Trump today and you tomorrow, suckers. Okay. They're going to keep the ball rolling. The left never gives back. It's Robert Higgs, Crisis and Leviathan. They use the crisis to grab what they want, a piece of what they want. And they never give it back when that crisis is over.
It's like mailing an arsonist a book of matches. That's.
Yep. I tell what I said when we were first looking at this, because of the findings, how badly they did disturb me. It's like, you're sitting at a bar and you have too many to drink. Right next to you on the bar stool is a known car thief, and you get up to go to use the restroom and you leave your keys and your wallet on the counter and on the bar top, and you just walk away, and you expect when you come back for that car thief not to have taken your keys and your wallet. He's gone, and he's not coming back with your car. He's not giving you that courtesy. And that's what we really did. I mean, there's just, look, John Adams, smarter guy than I am. If men were angels, we wouldn't need laws. And there are reasons. There are reasons why we had these. Go ahead, George.
So what is the problem? I mean, Brian Kemp, and what's his name? Ratfink, the Secretary of State. Ratfingsberger. Yeah. Now is their motivation that they just want to see Trump beaten? I mean, that's all really they cared about, and they really didn't care about anything else, because they really didn't do very much after November the 3rd to fight for Trump. I mean, you can understand Trump was very frustrated, but Kemp and Raffensperger were more than happy to just simply, run out the clock. Even if it meant that they would lose those two Senate seats. Well, what motivates somebody like Brian Kemp?
Yeah, and they did lose those seats, by the way. Democrats did not win them. Republicans lost them. People told us very clearly in our polling that, we're tired of voting for these people. We're tired of them begging us every 2 and 4 and 6 years to come out and vote for them, and they don't back up our guy. So I'm done, and that's it. So they lost 300 to 400,000 votes from central to southern Georgia. But I think, when it comes to Trump, these guys, and we've taken his social media and put it up, they hated that man. I mean, they loathed him, and they took pride in the idea that they could use Georgia to stop Donald Trump from being elected. So, I mean, that stuff was open. That was on their, Facebook page, chatting back and forth about it. Raffensperger's right-hand man he hated Donald Trump. And that's somebody who affects policy and who came out himself and said, after everybody started, crowing for an audit, he said this was, I can guarantee this was the most secure election in the history of Georgia. And then come to find out somebody voted with his address. So, it's just incredible, that they put their heads in the sand. I think a big part of it, they hated Donald Trump, and they really did foolishly believe that they could cut him loose and that business would continue as usual. They really did believe that. And I know that personally, I know it for a fact that Team Purdue and Kemp and the rest of them thought that they would actually do better without Donald Trump on the ballot, which was foolish. Purdue underperformed Donald Trump in the metro suburbs. So the bottom line is he was wrong. But in the end, they're also just cowards, George. Yep. They're cowards. I mean, I've been around Republican lawmakers for too long, and I can tell you the one thing that always struck me about these guys is how little spine they have.
So will there now be further audits in other states? I mean, I know Bannon is kind of pushing it every day on his show, and he keeps saying any moment now Pennsylvania is going to have an audit, or Michigan will have an audit. Is that on? Do you think that'll happen? Will Pennsylvania have an audit?
I'll tell you, out of all of these efforts that I have heard and I have knowledge about, the one in Wisconsin seems to be the most serious. They have subpoena power. They have said that they absolutely will use that subpoena power. So, but it's more than that. They understand what needs to be looked at. And this was the problem. I was flooded with calls after the election, explain this to me. And I was shocked by how some of these people really didn't understand where to even look, or how could something like that happen. And, repeating myself multiple times over 48 and 72 hour periods. And we're here now 8 months, almost 9 months since Joe Biden has been in office, and only one state has a grip on it. Where do I need to look? What tranches of ballots? How would it be done?
But people like what can go wrong, okay? And
Yeah.
I'm not pouring cold water on audits, not at all. However, I am looking at 2022. Again, kind of rephrase my earlier question. Are there enough Republicans and people that care about election integrity? Do they have their act together for 2022? We know it can be what drop boxes and the custody issues and all that. I mean, is there a learning curve? Okay, because one thing you've mentioned, and George and I say every day on our podcast, these people lack courage. Okay, so I mean, we may not be able to do anything about these audits, okay, because people will drag their feet and all that. But looking forward, is there a learning curve to start, spotting a problem issue before a problem issue that can be resolved before it becomes more than a problem?
I have had some reason to be optimistic. We have gotten calls from legislatures in different states, some much better than others. Who's, look, if I put forward a bill, what would I absolutely need to include to make sure this thing is secure? Because some people, although they're the minority, do understand that election integrity has to be the number one issue. They get that. And I would agree with the former president when he said that the other day. It's just that it's more difficult than it sounds, because we are coming up on the midterms and they have to make an argument to voters, outside of, well, there's potential for fraud here and irregularities there. They also have to talk to voters and tell them how they're going to make their lives better. So while I'm optimistic that some people have in good faith, legitimately reached out to myself and others that are the right people to talk to, it's been a long time. And, just think about it like this. It's hard for Republicans to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time, let alone just walk. And right. And basically, we're getting to the point now where something has to be done soon, or it's not going to be done. People are going to start to get into the fundraising grind. You will lose the attention span of the legislatures. And that's what happens. It's sad, but it's a reality of politics. After an election happens, you have 6 months to a year to crank something out, and then everybody just runs back to their donors. And it's a pathetic system, but it becomes a lame duck.
Right, but you've also got go.
Real quick, is it the mantra "stop the steal" as we go into the midterms? Is that a trap for Republicans? Because
I think
then there's the case of suppressing,
Peter.
They're suppressing their own vote. Go ahead.
Yes, Peter. This is what you nailed it, because really you do have to move forward, because Americans are very forward thinking. They hate looking back, which is why, again, I'm surprised Democrats even picked Joe Biden to run against somebody like Donald Trump. But generally speaking, we can't throw out the entire rule book because of Joe Biden's one irregularity of winning an election, right? The bottom line is Americans are forward thinking. They can't stand looking back, and they want to know what you're going to do for them to make their life better. And then secondly, the very idea of voter fraud, which is why the machine thing that people brought up, now at least maybe the Arizona audit can put some of that to bed. That was never the major problem. It was good old fashioned trickery. All right. So it had nothing to do with votes going overseas. And I know people hate it when I say that, but it's the truth. That was a distraction. And I think that look what it did in Georgia on January 5th of this year. Republicans, again, I'll say it, Republicans lost those seats. And the very idea, the left loves the idea of voter fraud, because it does demotivate, it completely demotivates the Republican base. If you have people running around and say, well, what's the point? What's the point of voting? They're just going to rig it anyway. Then that's what they want you to believe. That's what they want the Republican base to believe. And they'll stay home. Donald Trump brought both in 16 and in 20, he brought a lot of people out that just hate the system and did not believe the system worked for them and that their vote was pointless. George W. Bush, he did an okay job of bringing some of those same kinds of voters. Back then they called them the Ross Perot voters. After Perot's candidacy collapsed, they kind of disappeared for a while. George W. Bush did an okay job in 2004, getting a couple million of them back. But the bottom line is, until Donald Trump, those people were just not participating. The worst thing you could do for them, there's two things. One is turn back into the Republican Party you were before Donald Trump. They'll just disappear again. And two, tell them that their vote is not worth anything. It's psychologically not constructive. I'm trying to be nice. It's stupid to do this. You got to move forward. I'm not saying don't deal with the issue. Of course you have to, but you cannot make it so it's hopeless. That's really what you're doing. You're inserting hopelessness into their consciousness, and that's very dangerous.
But it's very hard because, of course, now a number of these state legislatures have passed voting integrity bills, in the teeth of Democrat opposition. But now you have the courts are stepping in, and as you had a court in North Carolina saying, this is racist. And so basically, prove, they basically say to the legislature, prove that your intent was not racist by putting in restrictions. So, even if you pass these laws, you always have the courts stepping in, essentially because, they do want to rig the vote. That's what they kind of, Democrats basically know they cannot win elections without cheating. And I think it's now it's baked in. So it's very, very hard to have serious voter integrity laws.
Yeah, and in the state of North Carolina, voter ID is 80% supported. Yeah. So, to give, I have given my advice to North Carolina on this, just keep putting it on the ballot. If you want to do it with the legislature, that's great, but keep passing it in a referendum. Keep putting it on a ballot and draw the lines. Make the lines between the party. Make that line that divides what one party stands for and another party stands for. Make them fight against voter ID. Make them, because it's so overwhelmingly supported. They're going to look extreme and stupid. And most Americans just feel, well, of course, common sense. You need an ID to buy a beer. You need an ID to go into a restaurant in some places. You need an ID to cash a Joe Biden check. Come on, everybody. Yeah. And you need an ID to get vaccinated, don't you? Right? Yeah. Yes. So, the bottom line is this is a loser for Democrats. And if, they keep getting judges to do it, they should just keep putting it on the ballot, having the voters' referendum, against a man or a woman in a black robe. Let them do it. And it's a fight that eventually they're going to win. I'm sure that they are going to appeal that decision. We've seen this here before in North Carolina, governor's veto, running to the courts, to overturn the will of it's obviously the will of the voter. And by the way, of course, Democrats support these things at lower rates, but it's still overwhelming. It never ceases to amaze me. Let me just look at voter ID in Georgia right now, because this is brand new. In the state of Georgia, we ask, in general, do you support or oppose each of the following election laws and policies, proposals, etc.? And then the very first one is requiring all voters to provide photo identification to cast a vote. Strongly support is 55.2 and support is 25.1. Again, 80%. And it's like that in North Carolina. It's like that in the state of Florida. Only when you look at who strongly opposes this, it's not African Americans, gentlemen. It's not any of these people that these other folks claim to champion. It's the white, rich liberal. Yeah. It's incredible. It's just incredible to me.
Richard, for me, this is very interesting because the Democrats know that a supermajority agree on voter ID, but what they do is they make us expend our energy and our resources. You know, this is a very, very insidious ploy. They make us waste our time, our resources, our blood pressure, something we know that is virtually obvious for everyone to know. It's a, you know, these people are devious, okay, because they know how to chew up time. They always flood the zone with this kind of nonsense.
That's so true. And
go ahead, Richard.
Oh, I was just going to say that number, by the way, included 72% of Democrats and 75% of African Americans. So, I'm combining I'm combining strongly and regular support. You know, I wanted to get a feeling on where all the intensity is for this. Oppose is so tiny, folks. I mean, 10.5%. Between strongly oppose and oppose, one in 10 voters. That's it. So, you know, it to me, it does cost resources, but it's a no-brainer because you do have to. The media is going to shill for the Democrats. They always do, and their referendums have been an effective way to show. You know, 2004 was a great example of that. They've been an effective way to show where each party stands when the media is out there trying to blur those lines, you know, and trying to obfuscate the positions of each party. And, you know, sometimes you just got to make them pick a side.
Right. But it is interesting, I mean, because the point Pete is making is fascinating because it is the relentlessness of the media in drumming that message. I mean, how has it come about that it's now accepted, you know, widely accepted, you know, by all reporters, that if you insist on voter ID, then that is somehow racist, and that somehow by making sure that there's no cheating in an election, that's known as voter restriction. And then, you know, if you just keep drumming that message home, and then exactly, then, you know, it forces Republicans or whoever, you know, Fox News hosts to be constantly on the defensive. You know, you're constantly having to try to prove something, but this is where the Democrats are very skilled. They set the agenda, whether they're in the majority, whether they're in the minority, they're always setting the agenda, and everybody else is reacting to the Democrat agenda.
It's very much like, you know, when did you stop beating your wife, you know, issue, you know, I mean, you have to expend all these resources to say, no, it's not true. There's no evidence. You go on and on. See, when you're explaining, you're losing the argument, and they know that. When you're explaining, you're losing the argument, and they know how to do it.
Both just made great points. In politics, when you're on the defense, you're losing. And I think, Peter, you said it before, and George kind of just reiterated in a different way. They just flood it. And Republicans are constantly trying to react. Instead of being proactive, they're constantly reacting to everything that's being thrown at them.
Even worse, they just shut up. They go silent.
They clam up.
Clam up, and it's a signal that they've lost the argument, and an argument they know they're right on, and the majority of the people that vote know that they're right on. It's really amazing. You know, there are a few out there, they'll hit every single thing coming at them, but most of them, they just clam up, and they just don't want to be. They hide from you. Okay. I mean, George and I have talked about this so many times. You know, how many Republicans go on Fox News in their prime time? It's like a dozen. It's not very many. You get the impression that this is, you know, a huge movement of expression. No, it's not. They have the same boring people over and over again.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, for Fox News is not as effective as it used to be. That's just a sad reality for Republicans, and they're going to have to swallow it. And they've lost so much trust among certain, you know, groups of American voters. Fox has made some really bad decisions in the last couple of years, and they're going to pay for it. So now they just recycle these same people, these, like, you know, repeat offenders, you know, that go on and tell the Republican base whatever they want to hear on I guess I will say it. I mean, I'm at a point when it comes to Fox News, I respect one show. I'm not even kidding. One host. And that's it. And that's Tucker, guys. I mean, that is it.
Richard, all due respect to the former president's daughter-in-law, but why does, Laura Trump, though, I mean, I'm sure she's a nice person. I'm genuinely, okay, probably well educated. But, you know, when Sean Hannity says, when we come back, Laura Trump on the Palestinian issue, it's like, what?
Yep.
But that's also an interesting question, because there was Trump after the November election, furious about the early call for Arizona, which completely changed the dynamic on election night.
That was an outrageous call.
It was a scandal.
Outrageous
scandal. And he made all sorts of indications that he was now going to sponsor alternatives to Fox. And Fox's ratings just collapsed after that election. It was running third in every time slot, third behind MSNBC and CNN. And then what happens? His daughter-in-law gets a job at Fox. So what was all that? What was the point of all of that?
When, by the way, you know, I had a reporter from the Epoch Times, you know, come and interview me. We did a poll in North Carolina about how a potential candidacy for his daughter-in-law would go. And frankly, maybe it was high name recognition. Early polls are early. That, to take it with a caveat, of course. But maybe it was a name recognition, but she was the only one who had a solid lead. And the Republican bench was not deep. Burr was a crook. And, you know, it's happened before. 2 words, folks. Kay Hagan. The Republican incumbent is viewed as a crook or a good old boy. And the state will not hesitate to put in what they think is a moderate Democrat. And then the Republicans have to figure out how to win it back in a midterm like Tillis did. So I don't know why they ran to bail out a lot of, look, you know, they made a lot of really poor decisions. There's just no way to sugarcoat it. But they ran to make decisions like that to bail out Fox News and leave others in the middle of a growth spurt that probably could have benefited more with the help of the former president. Let me just put it that way. It was just not the right move. He's made some good ones. He's made some very bad decisions.
The former president, why don't we move on here? 2024, Trump. How viable is it to you? Is it too? I get the impression that it's too early. I mean, I have 2 opinions of it, and conflicting opinions. On the one hand, I certainly think 2022 we should wait until we see how the lay of the land will when the dust settles. Okay. The way things are going, it should be all right for the Republicans, just for historic reasons. Though maybe, and I want to throw in this abortion issue that's, I think, come out of Mississippi, that's going to go to the court. That could be a black swan issue. George and I briefly talked about it a couple of days ago. The other side is that Trump, it shows he's hovering. You know, the Trump threat is real. He's out there. Okay.
And that's why they wanted to bar him, gentlemen. By the way, let me just throw that in there real quick. That's what, you know, the impeachment over January 6th was all about. Please God, don't let this man be another Grover Cleveland. Let's bar him from this office, because if he comes back and wins, we're in a lot of trouble. So, you know, go ahead, though. I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to say that.
See how I've set it up here. I mean, from a pollster's point of view, can you peak too early, or is Trump just in a different category because he's always in a different category? Throw in the mix of the Republican Party. You know, again, you have the Republican dozen that goes on Fox. It's always bravo for Donald Trump. But is that really what the Republican Party leadership thinks? What is the base thing? There's a lot of moving pieces here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's very important. You know, we talk about this a lot, but it's very important to note that I think Donald Trump basically won the presidency too early. He didn't have institutions or establishment support. He didn't have the support of a machine, and his own party betrayed him badly on a regular basis.
Interject really quick. When he was inaugurated, I remember doing a crosstalk on it, and you know, Steve Bannon was hovering around and everything, and I remember distinctly saying, someone like Bannon has to create a movement. It has to be institutionalized, okay? And it wasn't. Right. They didn't take it seriously. And he would have been the guy to do it, okay? Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
You know, I think you're 100% correct. And then it got worse with some personnel decisions that he made. You know, I mean, look, you know, I don't know the inner machinations of people's relationships, but you cannot show Bannon the door and bring in people like H.R. McMaster if you ran as Donald Trump ran in 2016. It's just completely foolish, to do. Fire Mike Flynn over, what the media portrayed to be some nonsense phone call, whatever you want to say, lied to the vice president, whatever.
Who cares if you lied to the vice president?
People lie on the daily basis to each other. The whole thing was ridiculous. But the bottom line is, with the exception of people like Stephen Miller, he did begin to lose touch with the people who elected him. I mean, he used Twitter as a gauge, to look at what his base was saying, and that's fine and everything. But you absolutely have to have allies, institutional allies, if you want to be effective. The left figured that out in the 60s, and that's why we have the dominant left culture that we have now. They took it in the schools, they took it in the courts, they took it in civil servant jobs. They wised up to that, and now they're reaping the rewards. And I guess Trump's populism on the right, its star just rose too quickly, and he didn't have a chance to build that kind of support internally. And it had a horrible effect, of course, on his presidency. But I think maybe the rules to him don't apply with whether or not you peak too early. I guess time will tell, because he's a known quantity. Here's what I would say. I did see the Rasmussen poll about a week before we polled this as well, a hypothetical matchup, and we found a 4-point lead for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And here's what is significant. A couple of things. One is we polled for the Epoch Times before in last November's election, and then we polled for the Public Polling Project. Nationally, I never had Donald Trump ahead. He would poll kind of close, but nationally, it is very difficult for a Republican to win the popular vote. I would argue it's probably not going to happen for a while. Maybe going on this path, or maybe never. But what we did see, and I'll explain why he did, but he did have a lead, and Rasmussen never had a lead that large for him either. So it is significant in an apples to apples comparison. We're polling the same way we were polling before, so it is apples to apples. I saw something different this time, guys, and it was just looking at the partisan dynamic. There were a bunch of independents who voted for Trump in 2016 who he cannibalized and turned into Republicans going into 2020. So it looked like all of these independents had changed their mind and decided to vote against Donald Trump. That's not really what happened. There was a moderate Republican vote that slipped away from him a little bit. It was very small, but it was there. And then but the Republican electorate was bigger because he cannibalized that independent vote. That's actually common, very common for an incumbent reelection, which they typically win when it happens. This is another one of those first-time anomalies. But this time around, the third-party voters didn't vote for a third-party candidate or didn't vote against the Democrats. So all those Green parties and libertarians, et cetera, down the line, they represent about 5 to 7% of the electorate. And that was the media narrative, that these voters broke for Joe Biden, and that's what did it. And that, we're only talking about tens of thousands of votes across 6 states, guys. It's not that much. He barely won this election. But the bottom line is those voters now cannot stand Joe Biden. And I can see it in the polling. With just raw independents, unaffiliated voters, he's in the low 30s. Among those third-party voters, whatever they may be, tax reform, the Constitution Party, the Green Party, libertarians, there's, depending on the state, there are many different third-party voters, and we don't include them in independents because we want to track those guys. Who are the Gary Johnson voters? Who are the Jill Stein voters? And they did back Joe Biden in our polling going into November. Now he's in the 20s with them, the 20s. And they either say they're going to vote for Donald Trump or they'll vote for somebody else. That's the difference. If you voted for Donald Trump in 2020, it's 2.5% say they would vote for Joe Biden. If you voted for Joe Biden, 12.5% say they'd vote for Donald Trump. It's a devastating turn of events. The vote shift, we actually did the numbers. The vote shift is about 6 million from Biden to Trump, and then Trump wins the new voters nationally by 3.5 points. So it's a landslide. It would be a landslide. stress
given
how
your,
badly.
given your experience and your not historical knowledge of these things, does someone like Joe Biden rebound? I mean, this is
that's a great question. That's a great question. I don't know how you reverse these kinds of numbers. I really don't. How do you take yourself? We just polled Georgia. 41% approve in Georgia, 55 disapprove. He's at the 33% of independents approve of him and 58% disapprove. That number of undecideds has now shrunk to almost nothing, low single digits. It's changed their minds, guys.
And considering the liberal media giving him a pass 20, every single day, wall to wall, at least very little negative, with the exception of the fiasco of the 10 days of the Kabul airport. That's anomalous, but the rest of the time giving him complete cover. And this is what is happening with independents. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. That's a really good point. And I think it's just the emperor has no clothes moment. This was really Joe Biden's bread and butter, was this idea that he was going to come in, stop the boat from rocking. He was going to be the level-headed. He was going to give us all, put us all on an even keel, and he was going to get COVID under control. These campaign promises were impossible. They weren't. I've never seen a president. Folks, this is a man who actually promised to cure cancer. I kid you not. If you remember back to the campaign trail, and people are now saying that's right. And COVID is not doing any better, guys. It's not. We have variants. That's a whole other issue. We have now vaccine mandates, despite the polls. Depending on how you ask the question, you will get the right answer. They are not popular. They are not. Despite what you see out of Fox News and all the other, speaking of repeat offenders who continue to blow election year after year and then think it's appropriate for them to weigh in on important issues like this. But yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, I think that, really just going back to the media, how they try to cover for him, you can't cover for reality. And that's really what happened. People are starting now to realize the economy was doing better under Donald Trump. COVID is not really under control. We're not back to normal like he promised. So which one would I rather have? The Middle East is constantly now the Middle East is in disarray. He blew Afghanistan, which hurt. Afghanistan hurt because it showed incompetence. It showed that there's nobody. We're a rudder. Nobody's behind the wheel here. And it gave people a very uneasy feeling that the leadership of the country wasn't competent. And it just came at the wrong time. So I don't know, even with the media shilling, I don't know how you cover from reality. Now that COVID issue is blown up, the emperor has no clothes.
The interesting thing for me is this, coddling Biden. We see something that I've never seen before, is that while they continue to support the administration, the Democratic Party, they can't help but show their embarrassment for being all in on this. Okay, they're embarrassed by it because in our age, when you say something on the airwaves, somebody saves it. Okay, right? Remember inauguration, Joe Biden's arms going around the Washington Monument. I mean, you can't delete that. Okay. And so it seems to me that we've seen something that I've never seen before. While they're still, obviously we have to keep the Trump threat at bay, but they're showing their buyer's remorse, their embarrassment of what they had hoped for, because it's all it's like sand going through their fingers.
Chuck Todd said it all, didn't he? I mean, for people who didn't see it, Chuck Todd is, and now, by the way, he gets attacked by verified Twitter for doing it. But, the bottom line is he laid it out pretty much the way I just did, which is the reason why this is so politically damaging is because he promised to be that even hand. He promised to get COVID under control. Now the boosters are the booster program is a total wreck. And, the vaccines are not working as well as people had promised they would, so it's just one thing after the other. And I don't know, like you said, there's video of it. You go from Joe Biden, the lights were like Joe Biden's arms wrapping around the people and embracing America, to the man literally hallucinating that he had a meeting with a rabbi that he didn't have during a visit that he never made. I mean, it's just like, guys, this is crazy. I mean, and if you're Chuck Todd and you're like, man, 12 months ago, I was carrying water for this guy. What was I thinking? Right? I mean, it's hard to, George, it's just hard. And I heard you, it's just hard to hide that.
Yeah, I think that's right. But there's also, I think, another aspect. I suspect people are coming to dislike him for his obviously ineffectuality, his all his whispering 1 minute, yelling at the next minute. But they're also coming to dislike his very divisive rhetoric. I mean, it's like one speech after another, one press conference after another, where he's being very, very divisive. And remember all of the attacks that were made against Donald Trump, that he was very divisive. But Trump was never this divisive. Trump was never attacked people. He never essentially.
He was a counterpuncher.
Yeah, he's a counterpuncher. He never said a whole bunch of voters are scum, which is kind of what Biden has said repeatedly. 80 million, 100 million people, half the country are just scum. They're not worth thinking about.
But George is absolutely right. We talked about this a few days ago, and this is a really interesting dynamic, is that Trump never punched down. Okay, he tried to punch power. He punched people that were against him that had great power. But when Joe Biden says, we're losing our patience, he's punching down. And people really, you intuitively feel it right away. Donald Trump, he was an equal opportunity offender. He really was, okay? But I never saw him punch down. And this administration punches him down every single day. Jen Psaki, I mean, she's like, some kind of, evil nun with a ruler in the classroom, okay? And so George, because the last time we talked, and I'm glad George brought this up, because I think I even mentioned it's difficult to dislike Joe Biden. I remember saying that, but I think what we've had since our last conversation, that may be changing. I think George is onto something.
Yeah, I do too, George. I think you got it, because this disapproval, strongly disapprove rating is really starting to spike, and it is on every issue. So Biden never really had high marks on the economy or foreign policy or any of that. It was the total opposite of Donald Trump. He had high marks on issues, but he had low marks on his overall, when you would ask general approval of him, because it was a personality thing. Biden was the opposite, like Obama, much like Obama, but Biden did have COVID on his side. Every month, that strongly disapprove and total, combined disapproval is just spiking little by little with COVID. That margin now, which was positive, is starting to shrink and shrink and shrink. And the number, what's important to remember is the number of undecideds got smaller. So over time, you can't see 7 or 8 point shifts from 1 month to another when there has been 3% undecided for both months, for instance. I'm using it for instance. That means people change their mind about him. They change their view. And in Georgia right now, 41% strongly disapprove, only 20% strongly approve. That is the hallmark of a hated man. That's what's happening here. And only 4% are undecided in the state of Georgia. I mean, it's Republicans also, it's not just them, because now independents, they're about the national average when it comes to strongly disapprove. We found 41% at 40.9 with overall, it's 40.3 with independents. So they're right there, when it comes to the national average. And Republicans, they're up to 8 and 10 who strongly disapprove. So I think, George, you made a really good point. He's turning almost into like the reverse. He's turning into his own version of Donald Trump.
But I wonder also whether there might be a feeling, almost like a guilt feeling towards Trump, that Trump really wasn't treated very well. I mean, he didn't deserve to get blamed for COVID. He didn't deserve all of the attacks. I just wonder whether a certain guilt feeling about the way Trump was kind of bundled out of office might also play to his advantage, because guilt feelings are a kind of a complex factor in politics. I mean, like when Lyndon Johnson won in 1964 against Barry Goldwater, I mean, it wasn't because Johnson was such a great candidate or people liked Johnson, but there was a guilt feeling over the Kennedy assassination. I mean, I think that played such a powerful role in giving him this huge landslide. And I just wonder whether that's a kind of a guilt feeling that, Trump really kind of got a bad rap, both the way the media handled it, the way the campaign went, all the suppression of all the any stories that were negative about Biden and everything, whether that again may yet play a role, kind of feelings of guilt towards Trump.
And some of it, I think, too, is just unknown in response to Trump Jr. tweeting about the story. The Politico book came out and, the journalist from Politico came out and confirmed the content of the Biden emails, which the media had said was Russian disinformation, and Twitter censored it, locked the New York Post out of there. You guys remember that? That was a blatant attempt to keep that information out of the public. And in response to Donald Trump Jr. making a comment about it on Twitter, I put up some numbers. In 2016, nationally and in every battleground state we polled, 90% or better knew about the Hillary Clinton email story and the WikiLeaks issues, generally the content of what her email showed. And we would ask, are you aware of news reports surrounding Hillary Clinton's emails? In 2020, that number was much lower when it came to Biden and the stories that the New York Post was breaking before the election. And how much lower, guys? I'm talking 70%, 72% in different states, going back to Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin. I think the only state we didn't ask that was Arizona, because we supplanted it with a question about the border wall instead. But, the findings, the results of the other states were conclusive. 25% less had heard about that story. And I think people now, when we look at that 2024 hypothetical matchup and we cross it with approval ratings, it's very clear. And the 2020 vote history. So there is definitely a remorse. People, whether, it's mistakes he's made in his administration, or it's, a matter of like what George, said, that people are just starting to realize things they didn't know before. I think it's probably a combination of both. And you can see it. It's in the numbers. Like I said, if you just look at 2020 voters, we're talking about a 6 million vote shift from voters who voted in 2020. And then you have to account for the new voters. It would be, like I said, what our polling showed, it was mind changing. It wasn't just, I think I'm going to sit this one out. It was mind changing. It was people who voted for Joe Biden say they would choose Donald Trump now. And I think people are just saying to themselves, gentlemen, we had a good economy. We had a peaceful situation around the world. Things were, with the exception of COVID, and like George said, maybe you got a bad rap, but things were doing better. Now everything's chaotic, all from the guy who promised to be the steady hand. And what do we have to show for it? A lot of negative economic sentiment too.
I'm glad George brought up Lyndon Johnson, because the 64 election is very interesting, because
yes, definitely.
Because I think Johnson drew the wrong conclusion. He was an amazing electoral success. We can't take it away from him. But I think he drew and his administration drew the wrong conclusions of what that victory meant. Because then we had the Great Society coming in, and I'm trying to parallel now to these huge spending bills, reconciliation and infrastructure, so-called infrastructure. George and I contend, and maybe you can give us historical background, agreeing or disagreeing with us, that even if Nancy can get it across the line, it's not a game changer in the minds of voters. I mean, people, they're not going to, wake up in the middle of the night and say, thank God the reconciliation bill passed. Okay. People don't do that. Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's only potential downside this week for Biden. And like you said in the intro, Peter, I think that's why the media did build it up this way. That is for Kirsten Sinema. That is for Joe Manchin. and all of the other, votes that they're afraid they cannot secure to get this, these provisions passed. I think only this could hurt Joe Biden. So if he doesn't get it done, it can only hurt him by showing him to be more incompetent. If they do get these things across the finish line, I don't really see the upside to it. Look, he's been putting earned income credits into people's bank accounts for months. And yet still our registered voter economic confidence index is in the 2. And it's at, we only started it this year, but 8 months worth of tracking now, we're at the lowest point ever. And when it did dive, which was 2 months ago, it dove by 11 points, and people just got those credits. From if you have children and you filed a tax return and you got I believe it was the child tax credit, you had additional child tax credits direct deposited into your bank account, and yet people are still telling us they have a negative economic feel. So, I don't really know what other we call it. We call it well, it's derogatory. No, we say it's basically the government doles out the cocaine, and when the high wears off, people are back now in reality. And it wasn't even enough money to get people to ignore, I think, what they see are fundamental problems. When we ask them about the economy, they don't bring up stimulus payments. They bring up inflation.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't bring up spending bills, Peter. They bring up mortgage payments they can't make. I mean,
what people want, and they may not articulate it, but they want a structural change. So, what the Democrats want to do, they just want to keep pumping the system, okay? Keep the spigot on. But that, so even if people get these child tax credits, it doesn't fundamentally structurally change their lives. And I think that's why it has a numbing effect. Okay, I got a few extra bucks here. But, why is the economy the way it is? Why is it changing?
Totally agree.
Why am I being left behind? Okay, and that is a fundamental question that was asked in 2016, and we know what the result was. They don't want to address those issues. And unfortunately, a lot of Republicans don't either.
Well,
I think that even Trump didn't. Oh, go ahead, George. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that, the Democrats have made the mistake that they've been making for many years. I mean, from the FDR years, say, okay, well, if you spend a lot of money, you basically win elections. People love money being showered on them, and you keep winning and winning and winning. But of course, that didn't work for Lyndon Johnson, because he thought, well, we'll have these big spending programs, and then Democrats will be guaranteed these electoral landslides. It didn't work. I mean, Johnson lost badly in 1966 in the midterms, huge Republican swings. And then the Democrats, collapsed in 68. So it doesn't always work. And there's no indication that Biden's big $3.5 trillion spending program is actually really popular, that this is what people want. So Democrats are making a huge mistake in thinking that this is the way to electoral glory.
Yeah, I think they're also trying a bit of what Obama tried, which was to pay off the unions that voted for them in 2020. And if they can get this money to them, then they'll be more, motivated to vote in the midterms. Obama tried that with the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It did not work. And what was his, wise comment? I guess shovel-ready jobs aren't so shovel-ready after all. I'm not sure at this point in time, the Biden administration would, even if they got this through this week and he got everything he wanted on infrastructure, I just don't know. Government doesn't move that quick. Maybe they'll vote based on a promise. I don't know, but just because I always try to be as accurate as possible. I did just bring up with that 2024 matchup, when it comes to who did you vote for in 2020, among the people who voted in 2020 alone, there will of course be new voters in 2024. So it goes into the equation with the overall numbers, but this is just those who voted in 2020. Joe Biden wins only 75.7% of the vote he got in 2020. Donald Trump is taking 90+% of the vote he got. Only 1.7% out of, gentlemen, 2,000 responses here. 1.7. That's it. If you voted for Donald Trump, only 1.7% said they'd vote for Joe Biden. If you're Joe Biden, you're losing 6 out of 10. So, 6% as opposed to less than 2. So it's a change. 13% say they'd go to somebody else. And among those Joe Jorgensen voters and other candidate voters, Trump leads Biden by 13 points. So it only looks like a 4-point lead nationally. But when you drill into this, it's a disaster for Biden.
How is this? How can Trump and his orbit sustain this? I mean, it's still a ways off. Okay. I mean, what I find really remarkable is how much the media is at fault here, because of course, Donald, the evil orange man, and once he's out of the way, we'll go back to normal, which is a ridiculous thing to think. You never go back. Okay. It's always, everything is dynamic here. But, the nirvana, the utopia that they were peddling, once this man is gone. Okay. And then you realize, what is really changed, and we're going south. We're going in the wrong direction here. I mean, I think it's this. He's the. I think it was after Hillary failed. Time magazine had the incredible shrinking president, and had little tiny Clinton. And this is what we basically have now. It's this entire administration is deflating in a rapid way because he was oversold. And it wasn't because Joe was good. It's just that we need to get rid of the evil. Well, the evil wasn't so bad, actually. And I think that goes back to the kind of regret that George was talking about, is that it really wasn't as bad as they thought it was, or they told us it was. And so, in a way, Biden is kind of almost like an epiphenomenon to all of this, because the storyline that was being sold hasn't come into fruition. Not on any by any metric at all.
Yeah, I think in order, give the one piece of advice, if I could give it to Donald Trump, I would tell him this: reality is going to carry your message overall. It just is, unless Joe Biden completely turns things around, which I think we all can agree is not going to happen. It's only going to get worse because his status is diminishing. I hate to say it, but it's true. I don't want to go down this hole, but it's not like he's going to get any more competent. It's only going to get worse. The people around him are like the junior varsity Obama people. It's not going to get better. So I think Donald Trump could basically just pull the Grover Cleveland, I told you so model. But this is the one piece of advice, and I know his core supporters hate it when somebody says this, but it's true. Show everybody, not just your base, not people you meet with privately, show everybody the other Donald Trump, the real Donald Trump, not the showman. If you've ever met this man, or if you've ever seen him outside in a venue where he's not the camera's on him and he's not constantly being attacked, because that's what does it. He counterpunches and he turns into something else. There's another much more endearing side to him. And if you're trying to be a comforter in chief, like coming back to the people and saying, I told you so, we learned a hard lesson, but we're going to pick up the pieces and we're going to get through this together, and I'm going to lead us while we do it. There has to be a certain quality that appeals to the seasick voter, because this what I called the seasick voter. The media is going to come back after you, and they're going to try to put you back in to that cycle that they always wrap them up in, and it's going to be never ending because that's how they do it. The seasick voter is the guy or the girl who voted for him in 2016 to say, I'll give him a chance, but they hated the daily rocking of the boat. And he can't stop the media from attacking him, but he can change how he reacts to it. And I'm not saying don't fight. I'm saying be more of what they told the country Joe Biden is, because for those who don't know the difference between these two men, Donald Trump is much more in real life. He's much more like what they sold Joe Biden to be. Yeah. But Joe Biden's never been that. Joe Biden has always been a mean, crotchety old man. Yeah, this idea he was a nice guy was a total lie. And they were making this argument to the decency voter. He is not a nice man, never has been. And anyone who's ever worked for him, I don't believe, would be first to run to a microphone to call him a charming fellow. He's a nasty old man and always has been. And Donald Trump is actually quite the opposite.
Yeah, and I mean,
in private.
if you think of 88, I mean, this is a guy who, was a multiple plagiarist that we found out. And then it became
disqualifying.
Yeah, and then it became worse than that because he came out that he was start of these ridiculous lies. I mean, imagine, well, I was top of my law school. I mean, absolutely ridiculous stories that anybody can check. But it also shows the quality of the man. The fact that so many years have gone by and he still wants to pretend something so nonsensical as, that he was top of his class in law school. So you're absolutely right. He's a very, very nasty person. And then again, I mean, this is something that Peter and I have discussed. During the 1990s, when it was on Yugoslavia, he was a real bomber. Wanted to bomb the Serbs, but he also had a very sadistic side to him because he was. I remember in the Senate hearing when he was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he would say, well, I can't wait to go visit Milosevic in prison, and then I can just gloat in his face and point fingers at him. Somebody who talks like that is not a nice person. So, you're absolutely right. It was always a fraud that they build him, that he's some kind of a nice guy. I mean, everything we've known about him, he's nothing of the sort.
But I think, again, what happened, even with all the sugar coating from the media, this is becoming apparent. He's a nasty piece of work, okay?
Yep.
And no matter how you try to spin him, you're not supposed to believe your lying eyes, okay? I mean, you just look at it and say, what's going on there? And again, we're not going down this elder abuse rabbit hole. I hate that. I don't like it at all. But I mean, when people voted for Donald Trump in 16 and 20, they knew he wasn't an altar boy. Okay, we all knew that. Even the evangelicals, they knew that. Okay,
that's
but
right.
Now you get this guy now that he's gonna the soul of whatever his catchphrase was here. I mean, George and I were aghast with the Tulsa speech. Okay, and then we're losing our patience. I mean,
that is
breathtaking,
dangerous.
Rhetoric.
It's Peter. That was threat. I mean, that was that. My wife and I watched that speech, and I just thought, and I hate using hyperbole, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but it really did have the put the Jewish star on your chest kind of feeling to me. It did, and I know it sounds. I'm not trying to use completely out of the realm of rhetoric or trying to inflame the situation. He was painting a group of people as the dangerous other. Everything that the left said Donald Trump did with illegal immigrants, only these are citizens. I mean, these are US citizens who have rights, and they're being not only the dangerous, they're danger to your health. They're killing people. They're overcrowding our hospital system, which is not true. I mean, there's so much, and he used, falsehoods, nice way to say lies. He used a ton of lies to sell that division. And, as if more than half of the people in Miami-Dade or desperately, wanting monoclonal antibody treatment aren't fully vaccinated. I mean, we know these numbers. We could look at Israel, and we can see what our future is 6 months from now, 3 months even, So they just, and none of the fact checkers, by the way, and they're going back to the media's role, none of those fact checkers, we would see them do after Donald Trump gave a speech, and maybe he would say something talking about the minutia of a topic, and he would get it wrong, because that's really the falsehoods Donald Trump told were, stupid marginal things. But the centerpiece of what he was talking about was true. That's not the case with Joe Biden.
Richard, the difference
about central points.
The difference is, George and I have talked about this at great length.
Just going to take a drink of water. I can hear you.
Yeah, when Trump would speak or something like that, and you and I, George, would say, "Well, there he goes again, his embellishment and all that." But it wasn't lying to people.
Right.
It wasn't intentional, and he made a lot of small mistakes. Okay, as any public figure would. But one of the things I'd like to ask is, Richard, is he going to come back here or?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. Richard, I want to ask you a question.
I was just drinking water. I didn't want to be rude.
Okay. I do it all the time. Maybe this is kind of a silly question, naive question, but I used to be a university lecturer, so there's no stupid questions in my opinion. But when we look at that speech that Biden gave here, where's his staff getting it? Are they getting it from their media allies because they think this is a narrative that is already been sold, because then Biden reinforces this message they get from their liberal media allies? Well, where do you think it is? I mean, is it symbiotic? Because it is very, very similar here. So have they quote unquote tested this message out that it will be effective? Because if this is the dynamic here, they're in an ecosystem that is so hermetically closed. Because the three of us, we watch this speech and I'm just like, what? I'm aghast. These are not sleights of hands, mistakes, mispronunciations, calling someone the wrong name and all. No. This is very directed, okay? And that's why I've never seen a president of the United States ever speak like that before. So, I mean, where do you think this messaging comes from? Or maybe it's unknowable at this point.
I think, honestly, it's all they have. I really think it's the only card they feel they can play. He's not popular on anything else. There's no issue that they can run to the American public and say, here's trust Joe on this, stick with Joe because of this. He was a one issue guy. It's incredible, but it's true. And now they're slipping on that. So I think their response to the slippage, which we at one time had him at almost 60% approve on COVID, on the handling of the pandemic, and very few, 38 to 40% disapproval. Now disapproval is in the mid to high 40s and approval is at 50%. So he's positive by low single digits now, or mid single digits, depending on the month. And they see that slipping away. And I really do believe the only card they have to play is a fear card, is division and fear. And if they can ramp this fear back up and they can point the finger at somebody else, then they feel maybe that the voters will come back to him, just out of fear, which is, I think, sad. But that's the direction they chose to take in California when Gavin Newsom was in trouble. They basically scared everybody back to their respective corners using COVID, and I think they feel that they can do that with this issue nationally as well. Not to the same, to the same results. Nationwide, voters are not California. That's a very blue state. But I do think that they feel they can, get those suburban women back in line, get the more affluent, I hate using that word, but highly educated, people back in line. The problem with that strategy is that this anti-COVID mitigation sentiment, from the vaccine down to lockdowns and masking, it's a broad coalition. It is not the coalition the media sells it as. It's not a bunch of NASCAR watching, deadliest catch watching. I mean, these are people who are, some of them are evangelical, some of them are urban minorities, some of them are highly educated suburban whites, who are just very skeptical. They're educated enough to know that, for instance, vaccines aren't developed that quickly. They're educated to know enough to know that we've never had an mRNA vaccine before. So but they're all being put into the same basket of simpleton, uneducated, anti-vax. That's why they haven't been able to move the needle on this issue, because some people.
So it's more like they're doing a kind of a 51% strategy, and the Democrats have been doing that. That sort of basically generate fear. They've been doing it, with the blacks in every election cycle, which is vote for us, or the KKK is coming. Vote for us. Yep. Or
the church will burn down.
Yeah, and the church is burning. The crosses will be burnt on your lawns. And I think they're doing the same thing with COVID. And of course, Orange Man is coming back. So if you don't vote for us, he will be back. And so they're just terrifying people. But it's not wholly unsuccessful. When you think of,
that's right,
what they did during the Trump years. 2 impeachments, the Russiagate fraud and everything else. I mean, it wasn't an unsuccessful strategy. I mean, it was destructive, didn't do anything for the nation, but it got them back into the White House.
Yeah, look, I mean, and you guys said it before that, you know, this, I think both of you did, but Peter, you said, look, this isn't something that comes out on accident. I mean, this was, you know, a speech that was written down and passed between 5, 6 different sets of eyes. I mean, this was intentional deception. Look at how they handled Afghanistan. I mean, so this is, of course, intentional. So they knew they weren't telling the truth on a host of things that, you know, the positions they took. No, the country's not going to collapse overnight. I mean, Blinken literally said the country could not collapse from Friday to Monday, and it literally collapsed from Friday to Monday. I mean, and there was a slew of lies just like that. They make a conscious decision to lie, and this is a man who did this in his campaign intro video when he announced that he was running for president. He went right to the Charlottesville hoax, which was one of the most dangerous lies the media has ever perpetrated. And by that time, there's just no way. Jake Tapper, of all people, went to the microphone the day he ran and announced he ran and said, this video is not true. All right. So, and he continued to perpetrate it. He continued all the way through his nomination. And he'll say it to this day. It was in his acceptance speech at the DNC. And the same thing we saw, you know, with the vaccination issues on down the line. I mean, these are lies that are flatly intentional. There's just no other way to say it. And then they don't care. We talk about the character of this guy.
Yes.
The equating equating Beau Biden's death to the death of those 13 service members was outrageous to begin. A pathetic attempt to draw empathy, you know, or to make them feel that he could empathize with them. It was a sympathy ploy, and to make them feel that he understood their pain. That was a disgusting, despicable move. Then the family says, don't do it. We don't like it. We don't appreciate it. Multiple families publicly coming out and saying it is inappropriate. Your son died of cancer. Our children died of your bad decisions. It's not appropriate. And what does he do? He walks out to the microphone in a primetime speech and does it again. What kind of man does that?
And all the other lies. Remember, just to follow up on that, and remember all the other lies that he told, which had all been refuted. I mean, the lie about the Russian Afghan bounties that he continued to repeat even after. You know, his own intelligence agency said that there was no evidence for it. And, you know, the whole Trump is Putin's puppy. He continued to repeat it. I mean, it's, you know, he just went on and on and on repeating it, even when it had even been rejected by, the establishment media. So that's the sort of man he is.
Richard, he knew the content on that laptop was legitimate. He knew the content on that. Like, come on. Are you telling me the Chinese hasn't made him aware of that? Right. Russian disinformation.
Okay. I want to go back to something you said earlier, because I think it's very interesting about this coalition and fear mongering here. I think that's a very unstable coalition. Okay. Because, again, shaming people. Well, I mean, look at African Americans. What percentage of them have taken the vaccine? They're hesitant for obvious historical reasons we don't need to go into here. But they've created a narrative about a group of people that don't really exist. I mean, as a coherent group, okay, that can pull them over the line here, because so many people have different reaction to this, particularly because now we have 18, 19, 20 months now, almost 2 years. Now you could pull this off for a certain amount of time, and then people are going to say, one size doesn't seem to fit all. And why is this state reacting different from this state here? And what is this governor? See, what I'm getting at is that if they think that they can convince people that there's a coalition of people that are backing them to shame tens of millions of people, I think that's an inherently unstable coalition and a very dangerous one, if not a desperate attempt to maintain control of the narrative. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm not a scientist, but COVID should have been done and dusted, okay? This Delta variant, they could have dealt with it in a very different way, but they decided not to. And now I'm going to segue, too many segues here. Are they doing this because of 2022?
Yeah. I think they really don't have any other card to play, and it's a dangerous gamble because there is no reason not to expect us to have a similar experience as Israel. 68-year-old man, Florida voter. It's funny. The reason you were talking and as you were speaking, he popped in my head, and the reason I already had him, his experience at the forefront of my mind because my father had a similar one, very concerned over COVID, has health issues, was dying to get the vaccine, no pun intended, my God, got the 2 shots, now is looking at the booster and saying to themselves, I think I'm just going to test for antibodies before the booster. I don't want to get booster dependent every time a new variant comes out. So this was a guy who, if you would have polled him 10 months ago, 11 months ago, he would have told you perhaps Donald Trump is being a little bit reckless with COVID and we need to be more serious about this thing. Now it's a totally different point of view for him. And also it didn't help that somebody he knew, 2 doses, Pfizer, still died. So, we're still seeing these. I don't know how easy it is to sell what they're trying to sell over the long term.
That's my point.
20%, Peter and George, people who are fully vaccinated with the 2 shots, 20% said there's just no way I'm not getting a booster. I took the 2 shots like they asked me to. I shouldn't need a booster every year. 20%. So that is now on top and compounded with the original 25% who are vaccine hesitant to begin with. So even if they got everything they wanted, I don't know how they would make the case, because numbers are numbers. I think we're going to end up in the same boat as Israel and others. Chile is another example, by the way, one of the more vaccinated Latin American countries. That's where Lambda came from, it looks like. So Lambda is a whole new variant now. And by the way, pouring across the southern border, unvaccinated in the droves.
But see, this is one of the things, when I look at the message coming out of the White House, it insults the intelligence of the average person. It does. I mean, I had 2 jabs, okay? And I'm not boosting up. I'm just going to get my antibodies checked, okay? I mean, if it's not broken.
I'm hearing that so much, Peter. I'm hearing that so much from people. I really am. I'll pay $20 to get the antibody test before I get the booster. That's what we're hearing. You are not alone.
And one of the things that, and George and I have talked about this at length, it really irritates me. The national conversation is that herd immunity and then natural immunity. I mean, if I'd had it, I would not want to put medicine into my body if I'd already had the disease. I mean, I'm not a scientist. That just intuitively kind of scares me. Like, why would I do that kind of thing? Okay. And I think a lot of people feel exactly the same way. And maybe there is a reason for that, but that case is never clearly, calmly made, because all we get is shaming. They shame you.
Yeah.
And that is the worst possible messaging strategy.
Especially if we are going to see, and I want to be careful here because I know we're on YouTube, but I should have sent you this to look at. Last month was the first month we asked about adverse effects and mimicking the way the CDC defines it between mild, moderate, and severe. And it's a little bit different this time because it's not, if you were to try to look up how they define it, it's not specific disease or specific reactions. Of course, you're going to see, certain anaphylaxia, myocarditis. You're going to see certain things repeat in severe categories, but they have a different definition. Mild, maybe you had a sniffle, you felt maybe your arm was sore a little bit, but it didn't interfere with daily activity. And then moderate is that it did interfere with daily activity. And severe being that it prevented daily activities and gave people a slew of things to choose from. Long definitions. The numbers were shockingly high. I'm just going to say that. I mean, I thought we'd come up with 1% severe. It wasn't. So I don't want to go down that hole. I want to be careful here because it does air on YouTube, but that's a whole other problem. Just shaming people who, I watched a panel with Mark Halpern on Newsmax, and it was 4 Biden voters and 4 Trump voters. And a younger guy gave a personal experience. And one of the Biden voters on the panel just called the man a liar, young man a liar. Well, and then attempted to shame. So why on earth would this guy go on TV and lie about a severe adverse reaction like that? I mean, it's just ridiculousness. You're not going to convince him to change his mind by shaming him, especially if those experiences are real, which we have no reason to believe they're not. It just seems ridiculous to me, Peter.
I just don't see this strategy. Maybe in the short term, it can have an effect. In fact, in like a totally blue state like California, yeah, I get.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, shaming just goes so far, because then people just, then they get their back up against the wall and they say, well, who are you to shame me? Okay. I mean, there's many strategies to convince people to do things. Okay. And shaming is one of them, but you play that card once, you can't keep playing it. Okay. And again, and if you disagree, you're a racist. If you disagree, you're a misogynist. If you disagree, you're a transphobe. Right. I mean, this doesn't, it's a very, like I said, it's a one race pony. You can't keep playing it. I can't say you get 50% plus one with that kind of strategy.
Yeah, and I think too, the longer that plays out, the weaker that argument becomes. I really do believe that. But again, it's the only one they have to play. In Georgia, that's the latest. But we just did the Labor Day poll was our first generic ballot poll. And typically this early in the game, Republicans don't have a lead. It may be close, and it could be a good year for Republicans if you're seeing like a 2-point lead for Democrats or just a few point lead. We haven't even moved to a tighter likely voter screen yet. It was just that Labor Day pivot, that very it's cliche, but I do believe in it. People are starting to get back to the grindstone and paying more attention. And Republicans already had a slight lead on the generic ballot. It's very early to be seeing a lead like that. So if you're a Democrat, you got to think about what can you do to change the direction, to change the course of where the electorate seems to be moving. The economy's not going to do it. The border is a catastrophe, and 60% of the country knows it. It just goes on and on. Foreign policy, forget about it right now with Joe Biden. If you mention that word, people think about Afghanistan. He has nothing. They have nothing. And in a state like Georgia, that generic ballot lead, which is about 4 points for Republicans, it's almost exclusively driven by dissatisfaction with Joe Biden, especially among independents. And it's a totally different coalition than the Senate race, which has we have Herschel Walker leading Warnock pretty significantly. He's kind of doing his own thing. He's got a totally different coalition than a regular Republican, a typical Republican candidate. But when you look at that generic ballot, it is so clear. Democrats are going to suffer because of the president's falling approval numbers. And if you're them, you got to think about what to do to hold Georgia 5-7 down the line, right? And
can you also now, all right. Now, what about the situation with the media? Now, the media have played a particular role with Trump, which is that they decided that they're going to try and ignore Trump. Should Trump actually say something, then the story is Trump was telling lies. Trump was, once again, peddling conspiracy theories, but they're going to absolutely make sure that they don't cover a Trump speech, a Trump rally, any Trump event. I mean, that is going to be a strategy. Now, we've never seen anything like this in a presidential election where one candidate will simply be totally ignored by the media, other than to be told he's spreading lies, he's spreading unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. It's going to be a kind of a very interesting dynamic. How do you have an election under those circumstances? I mean, YouTube isn't going to put up his rallies. They're not even going to have any post any of the interviews that he gives. So how do you have an election under such circumstances?
Yeah, it would be completely unprecedented, George. It really would. There's no doubt about it. You would think that would hinder him and hurt him, and maybe it will. And I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this for a while. Maybe it won't, because maybe without him being on TV so much, they wouldn't have the opportunity to just constantly thrash him. And he is sometimes his own worst enemy. So maybe, if you're living in the state of Pennsylvania and he does a rally there, maybe you do go to Rumble or an alternative source and you look it up to see what he had to say. But you're not constantly seeing him and the media constantly spinning. Because I'll be honest, I was really surprised to find him with a lead over Biden nationally. I was. A close race is a small lead for a Democrat in the Electoral College. I was pretty stunned. It reminded me of 2016. And Hillary ultimately did edge out the popular vote, but we did have Trump leading in 2016, Hillary more times than not in national polling. And I got to tell you, when I look at these numbers, it reminds me more of 2016 to 2020. And I'm not sure he has such high name recognition already. So it's uncharted territory, to be totally.
I think the interesting thing, George brings up a fascinating point, is that Trump has already presented himself. Does he need anything more to say, really? Okay. Because one of the things that, we're experiencing here, the way the media has just been egregiously dishonest on so many different issues. I mean, across the board, the whip story and all of that. Oh, even the freelance photographer that took it said, that's not a whip, okay? But I mean, I think that gets embedded in people's minds, because people know when they're being lied to, okay? And Trump is already a known quantity. I mean, does he really need to reintroduce himself? All he has to do is say, look who's sitting in the Oval Office. Need I say more? I mean, it's
but I do think that in any election, you need exposure. And why you say it's true is a known quantity. The people who voted in 2016, number of them are going to be dead by 2024. I mean, number of people are going to be dead by who even remember the Trump years, the 2016 to 2020 Trump years. So you're getting new voters who are now registered, who really may not know that much about Trump. So he has to reach voters, and if the media just simply doing an absolute determination not to give you any airtime, not to allow you on Twitter, Facebook, and Google, whatever. It may be. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's fascinating how one gets around that problem.
But George, we started our conversation earlier about the all importance of independent voters. I mean, they're going to say, why don't you give him a forum? I mean, why is it all one-sided? I mean,
it may backfire on them. It may.
That's what I'm saying is that, because I think that's the key demographic, the key voter to look at right now. And that's certainly the only group I'm following, because it's solidified on both sides. Okay. So, you have your typical MSNBC viewer. They don't want to hear Trump. Okay. They only want to hear criticisms of him. So that doesn't change the dynamic at all. And of course, I don't know how Fox will deal with it. But if you shut someone out of the public sphere that's running for the highest office in the land, I think that's going to. Common sense says, hey, there's something wrong with this here, and plus add to the fact we have a failed presidency on our hands right now. Obviously, the election cycle is a lifetime away, but the perception is this guy is done, and this week is kind of critical for him, because it'll show if he has leadership, like irrespective of what these bills have in them. Does he have the stature
can he muscle cinema still? Can he muscle mansion?
I think it could backfire. I think I don't think any of us have any answers right now, but it certainly would be the most peculiar thing we've ever seen in presidential politics.
It really would. And, they in 16, the sad thing is in 2016, they didn't learn the lessons, guys, that the voters were trying to teach them. You know, trade policy stinks. It hollowed out my neighborhood. I didn't vote to allow all of this unfettered illegal immigration, you know, down the line, whatever it may be. They just painted them as racist or backward. And really the lesson they learned was that they lost control of the flow of information. So WikiLeaks was a major blow. They saw it as a major blow, you know, and then all of the alternative media sources, even alternative pollsters like me, that was my real sin, was offering an alternative to the slime ball at their favorite website. That was my sin. And I know because I got calls from Google consumer survey people who work at, you know, they work at Google, you know, and I got calls from Nielsen Analytics, you know, all saying, wow, you got a pair, you know, and people are going to come at you for it. And I think that generally they decided that they don't need to listen to people who have grievances. They don't care what Michigan, they don't care why Macomb County voted for Barack Obama twice, but then, you know, flipped and voted for Donald Trump. They don't care why 31 counties in Iowa voted for Barack Obama, but then flipped to Donald Trump. They just don't care. And their lesson is we need to regain control of that flow of information. So whatever people hear goes through our filter and nowhere else. And they have been successful. That's just true. So even if he was to run again, it would be a strange animal because Jack Dorsey's not going to reverse his decision. That's not going to happen. Facebook is not going to let Donald Trump back on. So he would be running on Rumble and alternative, other alternative platforms and his name wreck. And again, I do see a real potential, though, for that to backfire because in 2016, the media realized they may have created a monster and they turned on him very quickly. And it was it had the complete opposite effect of what they thought it would be. You know, paint him as a clown. He's unserious. Yeah. And people were like, you know what? Why is he getting this kind of treatment? Why are they doing this to him? Right. And that actually piqued their interest even more. And people said, yeah, I'd give this guy, if he turns the apple cart, you know, like this, maybe I ought to give him a try or give him another look.
The interesting thing was when on Crosstalk, obviously we're covering 2016. And it was remarkable for me, the number of Republicans, Democrats, and independents. All of them said the same, at least on one thing. Everybody said the same thing. The only two candidates worth looking at is Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Everybody said that to me because it was interesting to watch. Everything else, you know, the 16 Republican, the other candidates. I mean, what a sorry group of people. Okay, we all know who they are. Okay?
Right, but that's the point. But that's the point, Peter. That the media saw that and they said, never again. We're not going to do that again. We're not going to televise these rallies. We're not going to have interviews with him. We're not going to allow him to monopolize prime time. And in 2020, they didn't give him coverage. And now I don't even think Fox News isn't televising his rallies. But I think, again, in 2024, I'm not at all sure Fox News, other than, you know, Hannity, Ingram, and Tucker Carlson, I'm not sure they're even going to have him on, you know, as part of interviews and whatever. So
guys,
interesting.
Yep. They did not show the rally and this is, I'm using one example, but it's important. They did not show the rally in Erie, Pennsylvania, where Glenn Kessler from the Washington Post actually gave Donald Trump Pinocchios for saying that he would kill the Keystone XL pipeline. He was against fracking. He put Joe Biden up on a big screen in Erie, Pennsylvania, and he let Joe Biden's words speak for himself. And then, so who are you going to believe? Glenn Kessler at the Washington Post or your lying eyes, right? And that was it. Nobody played that rally. The only way you saw that rally is if you watched it online. I'm one of those guys who follow him around, like Right Side Broadcasting, you know, and others, you know, but even Fox and others. There is an X factor in this, though, which is Newsmax, and their market share has gone up quite a bit, and they would cover him. Yes, so, you know,
they are covering him now. Yeah,
Richard, they do.
Richard, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I told George, but I don't know if you watched it, but Greg Gutfeld did a interview with Donald Trump. I don't know if you saw it. You should go and take a look at it if you haven't. And this was marketing genius on the
I saw pieces of it, but go
So
ahead.
yeah. Well, see, what they did was he milked it for all it's worth. He put it over 3 nights. Okay.
Yeah.
Good
for him.
3 nights. But one of the things I found really fascinating is that it was a totally different Trump than we have ever seen before in an interview, because it was the first question was, Mr. President, this is Gutfeld. Mr. President, what do you think of my ratings on my night program? Okay, and you saw a very different side of Donald Trump, because it was obvious part parody. Okay, but I found it's such a fascinating dynamic, because I did talk about policy, real policy issues about what he did as president, what the current president is doing. But I thought the approach was just brilliant on this on the part of both of them, because it was relaxed, it wasn't bombastic, but it had substantive issues that were discussed. I mean, it wasn't, Saturday Night Live or anything, it wasn't a cold opening or anything. And I'm wondering if this is something that the Trump people are actually thinking about, how to reintroduce him. We already know who he is, we have high brand name recognition, but there's another side of him that the media never let you see, ever. And you do see it in that case. I think I don't know if it was an experiment or just Gutfeld did it for ratings, and that's highly possible.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, I got to tell you, it was Republican primary. I believe it was the day after Donald Trump took the first national lead in a poll in the Republican primary for 16. And a friend of mine, Don Smith, he had booked him. And he brought him on, and I talked to Don beforehand, and he said, I got the Republican frontrunner coming on the show tomorrow. This is what I want to do. This is what I want to get out of this interview. If you guys remember, it was like a total circus. Everybody wanted to see what he could say next. And he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to steer this conversation on policy, and I want it to be substantive. I want viewers to get, a real idea of who they would be voting for if they voted for Donald Trump. It was the first, and to this day, and I'll go check out the entire interview with Greg Gutfeld, because I'm interested to see if somebody else was able to do it. But until Don, and since, I haven't seen one. Not Hannity. All the time Sean Hannity had him on, it was all bluster and crass, right? It was useless television. Let's be honest. And 25, 30 minutes. I don't know how long the interview was. It was a good, long, solid interview. He had Donald Trump talking about policy. It was a completely different side. And later, he had held an event for veterans. Donald Trump came in. It was in South Carolina. Last minute, by the way. He didn't even give a commitment. He just popped up to this event Don was holding for veterans. And he went around the room. Everybody loved him, except for one woman who was a liberal, couldn't stand him. And he sat her down and everybody else in the room loved him. He didn't have to win them over. He was a totally different guy. And he sat this woman down and listened to everything she had to say. I don't know, guys, 20 minutes with this woman, and not only giving reassurances that he would look at it, but he was literally turning to Hope and going, did you know about that? Write that down. Write that down. Right. I mean, because it was coming from a totally different perspective. And he was reassuring this woman that if I get in, I am going to look at it from this angle. Unlike, just the way the right looks at, I will take what you have to say into consideration. The event's over. Everybody walks outside. Don goes, well, what'd you think? Right. And she goes, I may have to vote for that son of a, It was a totally different Donald Trump. And it was like, first he got him, with this interview, and it was just a delightful interview. It was the first one that I saw that was serious and had Donald Trump speaking about health insurance and immigration in totally different ways, totally different terms. And then with this event, it was just like, why doesn't he show this guy more often? And I know that was kind of a
I have to say also
that
where I think he's really good, and I think I've never seen this with any other politician, is when he has a hostile interview, often has a very hostile interview, he manages to answer the hostile questions without ever losing his temper.
That's true.
I mean, remember, Harris she gets one question she doesn't like, and she gets quite nasty. The famous, like, well, I haven't been to Paris, or was it, or whatever, or I haven't been to Europe or something. Yeah. But when he was doing that interview with the woman on 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, I mean, she was openly rude to him. I mean, it's just absolutely unacceptable for an interviewer to be that rude to the president of the United States. I mean, she was pretty much calling him a liar. And didn't even bother to have any facts at her disposal. She just simply contradicted him, saying, no, it's not, no, it isn't, no, he didn't, whatever, no arguments or whatever. But he managed to maintain his composure. And I think that is quite a remarkable feat. I have not seen any politician who's been able to do that. I mean, that is quite something.
One of the things that I still can't get my head around, when I think about it all the time, is that Donald Trump is not, I think the way people see him, his supporters, they don't see him as a Republican. They see him as Donald Trump. Okay.
Yeah.
And see, and I never lose the opportunity to dump on the Republican Party. Okay. Because,
me either.
because I just have contempt for it. I just absolutely have contempt for it. But see, Donald Trump is Donald Trump. He is his own brand of populism. And in the way I look at it is the party pulls him down all of the time. Okay, he's popular in spite of the Republican Party. How is that dynamic going to work if he runs in 2024? Because we know that the usual suspects, the 24 of them that do media appearances, and they just say whatever they need to say at that moment in time. None of them have any convictions whatsoever. And I see it every time. And it just makes me vomit when I listen to them talk here.
Lindsey Graham. I mean, you say something like that and that pops in my head. Every time there's a story, Peter.
No courage.
Every time there's a story that I have intimate knowledge about, Lindsey Graham is always lying. So for instance, a great example had to do with his role with Nikki Haley. And her attempt to basically make herself the heir apparent for some reason in 2024, running all over donors' houses, telling, him and Tim Scott, telling all these donors it would be best when Donald Trump is gone. And then, we'll go back to Nikki Haley would be great. It's just two-faced. And then, with the Bob Woodward book, he tells Bob Woodward, and maybe he did. I'm not denying he didn't. He tells Bob Woodward that he looked at Trump's claims of fraud and was unconvinced. That's funny because I remember distinctly like it was yesterday, a phone call to a donor, personal friend I know, and he wanted Lindsey Graham to fight. Lindsey Graham just spoke with the president, and the president said, look, I'm going to need allies on this thing. We can stop what happened here. We can get to the bottom of what happened with this election, but I'm going to need allies. Pointed him in the direction of people to speak to. The Lindsey Graham, of course, says what he says to them, turns right to the donor and says, look, we all know they cheated. There's nothing we can do about it. Point blank, that's it. Then he tells Bob Woodward that he looked into it. That's funny because I was one of those guys on the list to call, and I didn't get a call from Lindsey Graham. So I don't know what in the hell he's talking about. I mean, this guy will say anything to any audience, that he feels wants to hear something, so he'll go on Sean Hannity and beg Trump supporters for donations because he believes the Quinnipiac polls showing him, trailing the Democrat in South Carolina. He'll do that one day and he'll talk up Donald Trump and what a big, huge supporter he is of Donald Trump. The next day he's in Texas in a donor's house, trashing the guy. I mean, this is who he is. And I'm with you 100% on that. When he made those
appearances on Hannity, he was just filling his pockets with money. That's all he was doing. No other reason.
But it also reminds me of Bill Barr. I mean, Bill Barr, who also looked into the fraud allegations, and then just about everybody was involved in that. Said, I never got a call from anyone from Bill Barr's office or the DOJ. So I looked into it, and basically there was no fraud, no fraud on a scale to alter the election result. He didn't do any of that, and yet he shot his mouth off to the AP reporter but he didn't even bother to talk to anyone in the administration about his findings. I mean, that's a measure of the kind of the Republican establishment.
And I know they did.
But my question,
I know.
But my question is still out there about Trump.
Let me answer. Yeah, let me refer. This is why, guys, it is really, really important for Republican primary voters to pave the way for Donald Trump this time. It is not okay to give him the same hand he was dealt in 2016 if you intend to reelect him in 2024. He needs more help. And not everybody is up. Lindsey Graham, somebody like that, McConnell, they just got reelected. But if you send them a message, politicians understand really two things: that they could lose an election, and that the wind is just the political winds are blowing in an unfavorable direction, and they take the hint and they go. All right, they just pack up the bags when they realize they're not really welcome there anymore. That, I'm not saying McConnell will do that tomorrow because he wants the reins again. If the midterms were to go the Republicans' way, it can't just go the Republican way. And I don't mean to name names because I don't want to pick sides, and I'm not some endorser, but like the right person has to win in the primary in Washington. The right person has to win in the primary in Georgia. All right. So you can't keep sending back these people. Liz Cheney cannot go back to Washington, D.C. I mean, this is if you really want change, you can't just change one man. The election of one president, a revolution does not make, folks. It really was always going to take more, than just the election of one man for one office. I think that was always very naive, some Trump voters, supporters, to think that, Donald Trump defeating Hillary Clinton was going to be, some big revolution, power back to the people. He was going to run into obstacles. It reminds me of Jackson quite a bit. He got there too quick, and then needed to take a breather, step back, build the infrastructure from the ground up, and then have support system when you do get elected. And he didn't have that before. He was constantly stabbed in the back by these people, constantly, and this time around, Republican voters cannot afford to fall for the normal gimmicks like Adam Kinzinger trying to get other people to run, split the conservative vote, have a big war chest, convince the people that an alternative Republican can't win that district. Nonsense.
Because, Richard,
nonsense.
Republicans really, a lot of them really don't really care about winning. If they have a safe seat,
so true.
Just so little courage out there. I don't see, very few of them have any fire in their belly to fight. I find I'm so exasperated by it. Okay. Because if you have your donors, and you feel comfortable, they feel comfortable with you, not you with your donors, then you're going to slide through. Okay. And so why do anything? Okay. This is one of the things I find very, very frustrating. And George and I have talked about always reacting. They're always reacting.
Right. But then that raises the real question is that, we've already talked about Trump. He's going to have difficulties with the media because the media just come to blot him out, pretend that he doesn't exist. What about how do you raise money under such circumstances? Just having stuff.
Yeah, I think he'll be all right. I think he'll be all right in that department because of his PAC has already been crushing the Republican competition. He's got a huge email base. That would be the next thing they would probably try to do, take out his email provider. I've seen that happen. This just, it is, like we said before, completely uncharted territory, but I think for right now, I think he'd be okay in that department. He still has his Rolodex, but his support base was always working. He was a completely different Republican candidate. Donald Trump's 90+% of Donald Trump's donations came in low dollar donation. That is not the case with the Romney campaign. That was not the case for the Bush campaign. Definitely not the case for McCain's and down the line. Republicans never get working class low dollar support like that. Donald Trump just completely rewrote the playbook for Republican fundraising. But I do just want to say, we were talking about primaries. And somebody mentioned Georgia. In that latest poll that we just conducted it's for people can read it all on Creative Destruction Media, creativedestruction.com or cdm.press. They'll see all the poll results there. Kemp is beating Vernon Jones. If Donald Trump endorses Vernon Jones, he'll take the lead. I mean, Trump's endorsement is worth 50 points in the state of Georgia. It's incredible. But there's this gross misconception that Vernon Jones would be the weaker candidate. And there's moderate Republican, constituency in the North. Kemp leads there overwhelmingly over Vernon Jones. And it is a misconception. It's backward, because I will say it. I've been saying it all weekend, but I'll say it right now. I don't think Brian Kemp can win re-election. I think he will lose. More than a quarter of his own voters can't stand him. His approval rating is 49% only because a third of Democrats say they approve of him. But once they have their own nominee, Stacey Abrams, whomever, they will vote for them, not Brian Kemp. And he'll be left out there flailing with a 70% approval rating among Republicans and a 32% or 38%, approval rating among independents, with independents are about split. You can't lose. I have never seen an incumbent ever win re-election losing a quarter of their base. And they're, not, because they will either not vote or they'll leave it blank. They will. They will pull it, just the same thing they did in January 5th. They are not playing around, these voters. So, it's an educational task, really, guys. I mean,
so why doesn't Trump endorse Vernon Jones? And Vernon Jones is a MAGA person. He's wholeheartedly for Trump, and Kemp is not. So what's stopping him from endorsing him?
I don't know. I've heard some whispers here and there about different things. I don't even want to repeat them because I don't know if they're, it's true at all. I really don't, and I will say this. If Donald Trump, unless something drastically changes, if Donald Trump sits on the sidelines, Brian Kemp is going to get renominated and he's going to lose. If he doesn't and he endorses Vernon Jones, Vernon Jones will pull ahead by 10 points roughly. He'll beat Brian Kemp and then he will have a much better shot, because I think he runs better in the Atlanta burbs and even the metro area. Brian Kemp is going to get killed there, and he's going to lose that conservative vote in the central and southern part of the state. Not that he's going to lose it. They won't show for him in the numbers that he needs. They're done with him, guys. I mean, they are. I mean, some people spit on the ground. You mentioned his name. It's over for him. He cannot win. And this idea that his approval rating is 49% and 30, he'll get a good chunk of that Democratic vote. No, he will not. They will vote for their person, whether it's a girl, a guy, it's Abrams or somebody else. They're going to vote for their own person. And he will be, congratulations, Brian. You will be you can go in the history books as having the highest approval rating for somebody who's been defeated. Good job. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I'm saying it here and now. He will lose. And it's that governorship is gone. Republicans gone. I don't know what Trump's doing. I don't know what his relationship is to Vernon Jones. Whether they're thinking about that or not, but that's just the reality. Not that I'm trying to dump all this pressure on the guy, but that is the reality of the situation in the polling. I don't think Vernon can catch him.
Yeah, it's just so. I mean, Trump endorses Herschel Walker. No problem there. But Vernon Jones seems to be a much more substantial figure than Herschel Walker. I mean, Walker's, he's just a vacuous person. He's a nice guy, but, there's no comparison with him and Vernon Jones. I mean, Vernon Jones has been in politics all his life. I mean, Walker, he talks like a good-natured footballer. I mean, which is what he is.
I was asked my opinion and the complete opposite happened. So I said that Vernon Jones should run for the Senate seat because he has legislative experience. He was in the state assembly. It made more sense. And typically celebrities do better in gubernatorial elections, executive elections. So look, Donald Trump's a perfect example. He came out of nowhere. He has no political experience. He won the presidency and he did a phenomenal job. Whether you like him or hate him, he did what he said he was going to do. There's no disputing that. I'm not talking about whether or not somebody's listening and agrees with his policy. The man did what he said he was going to do. End of story. And when we look back on other candidacies, it was, the Sonny Bono becomes a senator kind of thing. We have those examples, but generally speaking, it would have made more sense to have Vernon run for the Senate and have Herschel Walker run in the primary against Brian Kemp, who was obviously going to be a more difficult primary opponent. That competition is just stiffer. It's just tougher. So put the celebrity with high name recognition and executive experience against the executive, not a legislator. But it is what it is. It turned out to be totally flipped. The good news for Herschel is that race is over. There is nobody in the primary who's going to come close to him. He is way ahead. He's almost at 60% of the Republican primary vote. It's done. And I imagine when we get closer, he'll dominate. And then he does have a lead against the Democratic incumbent. Real quick, let me just read this off to you. I just want to pull it up real fast. Bear with me 1 second. The problem that Perdue and Loeffler had was that they really couldn't generate that turnout in the central part of the state and the southern part of the state. And what that meant ultimately is that those margins were not big enough. Walker leads in every single region except for the Atlanta metro area, where he's, of course, getting clobbered 55-28. But even in the Atlanta metro suburbs, Walker has a 2-point lead. And then in the central and southern parts of the state, he's got enormous leads. So, and when I say enormous, I mean like 65-35 in some of these areas. So he's doing what a Republican has to do to win the state of Georgia these days. And that's what Loeffler couldn't pull off. She got killed in the suburbs outside Atlanta. Perdue, with all of his talk, Mr. Moderate, high name recognition, Georgia royal family nonsense, he did worse than Trump in the burbs, and he did worse in the conservative areas. Walker is just he's cleaning up. He is. I mean, when I looked at that,
those two candidates were so unimpressive.
Completely terrible candidates, Peter. Terrible.
All right. Well, this is a fascinating discussion as always, and thank you so much, Richard, for joining us. We had a blast. I mean, we learned a lot, and we had a number of listeners, and they made all very interesting comments. So everyone was enjoying this, and we're looking forward very much to resuming our conversation in a couple of weeks. So thank you so much for giving us.
We'll be on your turf.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to say we'll see you soon on Inside the Numbers. I really enjoyed this,
really
guys.
Looking forward to that. So
another
thank you.
Another great
Richard,
one.
it's always an education for me. Really, such a wealth of information. It's really and such a breath of fresh air. My goodness.
Absolutely.
That's it. I can't tell you. I really enjoy these a lot, and I'm looking forward to the next one on yours and mine. And remind me, actually, not even when we get off, I'll send you the crosstabs for Georgia. You could share them with your locals community. I'm sure they'd love it.
Yeah, we're going to do that. All right. Thanks so much. See you in a couple of weeks.
All right, guys.
Bye, Peter.
See you soon.
And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.
That was a marathon.
Awesome. Awesome, guys. Yeah. Awesome. Really is. I mean, when you are on this week, aren't you? On Inside the Numbers?
No, I think it's I've forgotten the exact date. When
we're still live on YouTube, guys.
Okay. All right. All right, we're live on YouTube. All right then. See you.